The prosecution and the defense, they sparred over the testimony of a forensic psychologist. Prosecutors also released dozens of new photos seen by the jury, revealing what police seized in the raid on Diddy's Miami Beach mansion. And the judge signed an immunity order to force Diddy's former executive assistant to testify. But here's the big question tonight. Will the jury, the actual jury, connect the dots between the explanation of a trauma bond and the world that Cassie Ventura said that she lived in? The prosecution called psychologist Dawn Hughes to explain why Cassie may have stayed in an abusive relationship with Diddy for years. The judge had already ruled that she could not talk about coercive control, but she could discuss more broadly why victims may choose to stay in violent relationships or feel like they could not leave them. Hughes testified, quote, "When you're getting unpredictable abuse and unpredictable love, that creates this intermittent cycle. It's like a slot machine." She went on to say, you keep going back because you want that good feeling. They want that good partner that they fell in love with, and that becomes an immense trauma bond. Now, the defense repeatedly pointed out how Hughes had not reviewed any evidence in this case. More on that in a moment. But on redirect, the prosecutor finished with what you might call a kind of a legal mic drop. She asked Hughes if she'd been retained broadly by defense attorneys. She said, yes, of course. The prosecutor then asked, in fact, have you previously been retained by any of the defendant's attorneys here in this case? She responded, yes, I have. Now, she wasn't saying that it was actually this matter with Sean Diddy Combs, but the defense attorney she's talking about was Brian Steele. And his legal team later said that Steele, in a different case, chose not to use Hughes as a witness in that case that he was on at the time. And the client that he was dealing with was a victim of domestic violence herself. Now, that testimony will be a lot for the jury to unpack and try to pull apart. So will all the evidence taken from Diddy's mansion in Miami Beach just last year. Police seized parts of AR-15s. Some had their serial numbers scratched off. They found a loaded handgun. There were high heels, a lot of them. Also, bottles and bottles of Astroglide and baby oil and lubricant. And police discovered an assortment of drugs, including ketamine and cocaine and MDMA. The special agent in charge of that raid testified about all of it, including 6 people on the property who were briefly put in handcuffs. Now, the last witness of the day was Diddy's former executive assistant, George Kaplan. Now, he tried to plead the Fifth to protect against self-incrimination, but the judge, by granting him immunity, paved the way for him to actually go on the stand. And once he got on the stand, he testified about getting his boss drugs at times. He testified about setting up and cleaning up Diddy's hotel rooms. He stocked them with clothing and candles and liquor and baby oil. He bought some of these room supplies, he says, with his corporate credit card and cleaned up the rooms after Diddy left before the maid service came in. Now, why do that? Why do it before the maid service comes in? Well, because Kaplan put it this way. Protecting him and protecting his public image was very important, and that was something I was very keen on doing. Now, Cassie testified that Kaplan quit after seeing Diddy abuse her. Now, we haven't heard that from him yet, but he is back on the stand in the morning. And you know who else prosecutors plan to call? Rapper Kid Cudi. Recall that Cassie testified that she was once in a relationship with him, and that sent Diddy spiraling into a jealous rage. Back with us tonight, CNN's Elizabeth Wagmeister, who witnessed all the testimony in court with me today, been following along so closely. So talk to me about this forensic and clinical psychologist. I mean, it was very pivotal for her to come in and try to explain this looming question of why might someone stay, because Cassie's credibility might be questioned for those who don't understand why.
This was a pivotal witness for the prosecution because these sex crimes, they can be very confusing for a jury. There's a lot of gray area. This is not black and white. So she came on to testify to some of the behaviors that are common among all trauma victims, whether that is a victim of domestic violence, of sexual abuse, even of something totally unrelated to this. And that was key for the prosecution because she said, I am not related to this trial. I have not met with anyone. I have not met with the defendant, Sean Combs. I have not met with any of the government's witnesses, such as Cassie. So she came into this, what she said, as a blind witness, but she did corroborate what Cassie and some other witnesses have said. For instance, there was one part that really stuck out to me, Laura, when I was sitting there in the courthouse. She said that, quote, it may be curling up in a ball on the floor. That was something that she explained for a common behavior that could be seen by a victim of domestic violence. Basically saying they may curl up on a ball on the floor so that they basically stop the violence that is happening to them. Now, why this stood out to me is because I remembered that this was very similar to what Cassie testified to what we saw in the video that our team at CNN broke, that hotel surveillance video when she curled up in the fetal position. And we went back to some other testimony. Dawn Richard, you remember her, she said about Cassie, quote, she went into the fetal position. The security guard, Israel Flores from the hotel, said Cassie was bundled up in the corner. And Carrie Morgan, who was Cassie's best friend and testified to corroborate her account, she said, quote, she was like a loose fetal position. So I do wonder if the jury connected those dots of this psychologist to say, even though she's not talking about Cassie, that sounds familiar, and maybe now I understand more some of the behaviors of Cassie.
And there were a lot of objections, almost as if her vocabulary was so precious because of those details, that the defense did not want that jigsaw puzzle to come into full view if they were relating to that. There was also moments, though, when the psychologist, talked about the coping mechanisms that are used and how one decides to tell about the abuse, and also about the returning to the relationship. Describe to me a little bit about the way in which she talked about a domestic abuse victim not feeling as though they could escape, even if they wanted to.
Yeah, so she said that a lot of domestic violence victims, they can feel trapped in the relationship. That is the word that she used. She said that these relationships often begin with love, so these victims can want that love. They are yearning for that. So that could be one reason why they come back. Another reason is financials. She explained that oftentimes the abuser will control all the finances in a relationship, and that is their way to control the victim. This was another aha moment for me, a light bulb moment where I said, that's what Cassie testified to. Looking down at my notes from court, Cassie said that Diddy controlled her rent, her cars, her clothing, her travel, and even cash. So again, I wonder if the jury said, that sounds familiar.
There's a lot more to unpack, including that next witness, George Kaplan, who'll be back on the stand tomorrow. An assistant will unpack that. I want to talk to our great legal minds as well. So follow me over to the table because we've got some really great conversations ahead. We have got defense attorney Joey Jackson, who is with us today. Also, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, where, of course, this trial is taking place, Jennifer Rogers, and defense attorney, of course, Stacey Schneider is here as well. All right, we got a lot to unpack, so let's get right into it. And I want to begin with you, Jennifer. This is your old office as well. You heard from the expert witness, Dawn Hughes, this psychologist who was testifying as a blind expert, meaning she did not know Diddy, didn't know Cassie Ventura, and she was trying to paint a picture in general terms. How does this play for a jury? Because I gotta tell you, there were so many objections today, keeping her on the tightest of leashes. She couldn't get into many things. It had to be generalized.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful. I mean, I think the reason you saw so many objections is because the defense realized that the jury was making those connections that Elizabeth was just talking about, right? They're saying, oh, credit cards, oh, rent, financial control. Yeah, we heard all of that from Cassie Ventura. So there's no question it was very helpful for the government's case, harmful to the defense's case. I was a little surprised to see it, to be honest. I haven't seen that kind of testimony come in very often. So
why were you surprised? Because they even let it in? Or
exactly. I think it's really, really uncommon. I haven't seen anything like it before. I mean, an expert usually does that case, right? Looks at the documents in your case, if necessary, interviews the witnesses in your case to draw on and to then.
But there are subject matter experts, right, who could maybe talk about more broadly. But you're saying what was odd was that she had not reviewed, had not talked to these people. And what's the intimation? That by failing to do so, she was overgeneralizing and therefore not having credibility? Because that's what the defense wants to go with.
Yeah, so this is a big deal. And to Jen's point, if I'm the judge, I don't allow it at all. Now, it's a game changer. Why? Because I think inquiring minds want to know, right, what was the coercion? if this is about sex trafficking and not a freaky relationship, it's about the fact that I coerced you to do this.
But you
not
can
of your
talk
free
about
will.
coercion.
Yes, I get it. But inferences are drawn. If you're controlling everything, if you're behaving as a victim in this way, if you feel in love with someone and you have this mold of a person, right, who, if you're a victim of this violence, you tend to act this way, what is the inference that's going to be made, right? A duck by any name is a duck. And so the reality is what does the defense have to rely on? The defense has to rely on the fact that you did not interview this specific witness. Not every witness is the same. We don't live in a cookie cutter society. You never met, right, a defendant who you testified for. You're always testifying for the victims. You're a hired gun in this particular situation. You've met with the prosecutors multiple times, and you've coordinated your testimony such that those dots can be connected. That's the defense argument. But the fact that she testified, very powerful for the prosecution. And if the jury draws those inferences of coercion, there is problems in Diddyland.